Hey, Roman Trust here with Mission Forge, and today, guys, we're going to be talking about steel. So real quick, you'll notice I'm in my work truck, and you might be thinking, why? Well, one, it's a lot quieter, and I need you guys to be able to hear me. I don't have a new microphone yet because I've been stupid and not ordering it. So I want you guys to be able to hear what I got to say. We're not doing any forging, but I want to talk about steel and breaking down what steel is, how we get the nomenclatures, what the nomenclatures mean, so that way, if you're an inquisitive mind like myself and want to know what it all means, I'm going to hopefully break it down for you. Also, if you are not a blacksmith or a person that bangs on hot metal, but like an engineer or a science geek or something like that, which is fine, I'm not really diving deep into the molecular structure of steel, the different phases steel goes through, or anything like that. Okay, that's a little too deep for this. This is kiddie pool stuff. That's ocean level. Okay, we're in a kiddie pool type pool here for this information. So with that, let's go ahead and let's get started. So first things first, guys, what is steel? Steel is a combination of iron and carbon put together, and now you got steel. Now the problem though is that steel is not all equal. When steel was first being made, it was really just kind of like a trial and error thing. Not even so much trial and error, but you would take iron, sand, like black sand and charcoal, you mix it together into a foundry, and you get like a bloom or a woot steel, depending on where you're at in the world. And then you would smash it down, and then you would break it up, then you stack it up, and you smash it down and break it up and put it together, smash it down. You kept doing it over and over and over again until you got the steel to be homogenized, pretty much the same with the carbon content throughout the entire thing of steel. And that's how they would make steel. Well, obviously, as time's gone on and the Industrial Revolution happened and stuff like that, industrialization, steel became more highly... became easier to produce and manufacture, and then it became more in demand. And because of that, we had to, as a society, had to normalize or standardize the steel making process in how to order it and all that stuff. And that was for trade, for ordering, for commerce, and you name it. So, and there were two governing bodies who created these nomenclatures. Now, what do I mean by nomenclatures? It's numbers like 1084, 5160, 9260, 4140, 52100, 80 CRV2. They came up with these nomenclatures, and there's a very specific reason they have these nomenclatures, which we'll get to later. So they had to normalize it. And the reason they had to, standardize it. So the reason they had to standardize it because not all steels are made the same. Some steels they need where it has more rigidity and more flexibility, so they came up with like a 5160. And in order for car manufacturers to make springs, they needed like, hey, you know what? 1060 is better than 1095, but 1060 still corrodes faster and stuff like that. So they came up with a new steel, and here's what it is, but nobody knew what to call it. So these two governing bodies said this is 5160, and those two governing bodies was SAE, which stands for the Society of Automotive Engineers, and then there is the AISI, which is the American Iron and Steel Institute. So what they did is they came up with this nomenclatures that help us understand the different types of steel and ordering process. Now, when you are doing, say, something big, you're like, say, making a bridge, you need to identify which steel you need. So for example, if you're building a bridge, like as a blacksmith, it doesn't matter if it's AISI or SAE, they're virtually the same. They're almost identical. They're actually interchangeable. So if I wanted to order a steel that was 4140, I can be like, hey, I just want 4140. I can say, hey, can I get SAE 4140 steel? I can also say, can I get AISI 4140 steel? It'll be exactly the same. They're literally interchangeable. In fact, we never use them, so we don't ever say them. But what I mean by interchangeable, it's like using the word but and however. It's like, I like I like spaghetti, but I wanted tacos. Or I like spaghetti, however, I want tacos. Interchangeable. That's what I mean. But if you're building like a bridge, you then needed to specify I needed SAE or AISI because the chemical composition was slightly different from each of them, but on a small scale thing like making a knife, didn't mean anything. We don't even use it. So they came up with the nomenclatures, but in 1995, SAE kind of stepped away and gave all control over to AISI. So any new steels that are being made, AISI now designates the nomenclatures for them. So what do I mean by the nomenclatures? Well, like I said, that's like the 5160. And what does 5160 mean? Hopefully you guys have enough room here to see. So each number in these nomenclatures are going to be between 4 and 5 digits on average to designate what the steel means. And that helps steel manufacturers and steel buyers and makers and stuff like that to know what type of steel to make. So if somebody says I need 5160, they know exactly what to add into it for the most part. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. So that first digit, that 5, indicates what alloy that steel is going to be. Now there are 9 different types of alloyed steels. 9. Okay, 1 through 9. That 5 indicates that it is a chromium alloyed steel. So it's chromium based. That 1 in 5160 determines what percentage of that top group alloy. So that top group alloy being chromium, it's going to have 1% chromium in that steel. And that 60 indicates that it's got 0.60% carbon. So it's literally how much carbon content per 100th of a percent is in that steel. So it's going to be a chromium based steel. 5160 is a chromium based steel with 1% chromium with 0.60% carbon content in that steel. Simple enough. Another example would be like, say, 9260, which would be a silicon manganese alloyed steel with 2% silicon manganese in it with 0.60% carbon content in that steel. Simple enough. That one, now let's say let's talk about something like 1084. What is 1084? Because that 1 indicates what? Well, the 1 is generally considered a plain steel or sometimes known as wrought steel. And that 0 indicates that it's got 0% of the top group alloy. So in a 10 series steel, like a 1084, 1095, 1070, those are 10 series steels. 10 series steels is still an alloy. It just isn't a top group alloy. There isn't one alloy that's more than the other. Really. I mean, there is more than one than the other, but it's not in significant proportions like a 5160, for example. So it's got 0% of the top group alloy, and as I said, 1084, then that 0.84% carbon content. So it's a plain steel with 0.84% carbon content. Now, not all 10 series steels are made equal. For example, a 1040 steel is going to have more manganese than a 1095. A 1095 might actually have more sulfur than a 1040. So they're still alloys, whatever, and they're all made slightly differently. And the reason being is because they may need to add a little bit more manganese to 1040 to give it the chance to get a little hard, whereas too much hardness and a higher carbon steel, they need to give it a little bit of flexibility in there, so they'll add more sulfur. Now, real quick, I have been mentioning high carbon steels and stuff like that and low carbon steel. So what does that mean? Quick change of venue because I realized a major mistake when I was editing. So real quick, there are 3 types of carbon steels. You got your low, your medium, and your high. Your low carbon steel is going to be between, it's going to be anything under, I think, 0.30% carbon content is low carbon. Your medium carbon is anything above 0.30% to 0.60% carbon is your medium carbon, and your high carbon is from 0.60% above. Now, that can depend on who you talk to. In some sources, it might be a little murky. Some might say medium carbon is at 0.25%, and some will say high carbon starts at 0.70%. It just all depends, but that's just the rough numbers there. Now, the higher the carbon content, the harder the blade can be, which generally means the less you have to sharpen it, which means also the more rigid and less tough it can be. So, for example, you wouldn't want to use a 1095 as a leaf spring. A 1060 would be a lot better as a leaf spring because it's got less carbon in it, and it will spring back into its position. Of course, later on they said, hey, we need, it to corrode less, so they added some chromium to it and some other little things, and it made it a little tougher, more durable, so that's why we get 5160. But again, going off on a tangent there, we don't want to go do all that. So, the lower the carbon content, the softer the knife will be, whereas the higher the carbon content, the steel will be, and the higher the carbon content, the harder the blade will be. All right, so now we understand what the 4-digit nomenclatures mean. First digit is the top group alloy. The second digit is the percentage of the top group alloy, and the last 2 digits is the percentage of carbon that's in it to the 100th of a percent. So 0.60, for example, for like 5160. Now, what about a 5-digit nomenclature, like a 52100? Well, 52100 is a bearing steel, just so you guys are aware. But it still follows the same principle pretty much as a 4-digit. So the 5 indicates is a chromium-based steel. with the 2 meaning it's got 2% chromium in it. And then it's 1.00% carbon content. So it's 1% carbon content. So it's a very hard steel. Now, I'm using just as it's strictly as an example. If you saw something that said 52120, then it'll be a chromium-based steel with 2% chromium with 1.20% carbon content in there. Simple enough. That's what that means. All right. Now, there's some other steels where you may be noticing that it has a letter thrown in there. So sometimes if you're looking up steels, you might see something that says like 1084H, for example. What does that mean? The H indicates that it's hardenable, so it's a hardenable steel. If you see something else on the end of it, like an E, it means like it's an electrode, and C, I don't remember what it was. But now sometimes they'll put a letter in the middle of the actual nomenclature. So you might, again, just as an example, see something that says 10B84. That B indicates that some boron was put into that steel. If you see something that says like an L, it means lead was added into the middle of it. N means nickel. CR means chromium. V means vanadium. M means manganese, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's what that all means. So if you see something like 80CrV2, what does that mean? Well, 80CrV2 is also one of those weird exceptions, because it's very similar to 5160. 80CrV2 was like known as, I think, Swiss steel or Swedish steel, I think. But when they normalized it or standardized it, it became 80CrV2. So it has 0.80% carbon content or right around there. It has chromium and vanadium with 2% vanadium in that steel. That's generally what it means, okay? Now, just so you guys are aware with the carbon content, just because it has 1084, says it's 0.84% carbon content, that is a generalization. It has around it. It could be as low as, say, 1081 or as high as, like, 1087. So it's just a rough guesstimate, not guesstimate, it's the average of what it's supposed to be, okay? They're pretty darn close to making almost exactly 0.84%, but just be aware of that's what it means. Now, going back to the numbers or the letters inside the nomenclatures, there's another one that does some people for loop 15 and 20. Well, we know N means nickel, so it's a nickel-based steel. But what does the 15 and 20 mean? I don't know. I'm not going to lie, I don't know. I've tried finding out for years what it means. I've only found about 2 sources that explain what it is. Some sources say that the 15 indicates that it is a regular steel, a plain steel, with a certain carbon content being a minimum and a maximum level or something like that. The N being the nickel with about 2.0 or about 2% nickel, 2.0% nickel in there, which is crazy because according to most manufacturers, 15 and 20 is a 0.75% carbon content with 1.5% nickel. So another source had stated that it was 1.5% nickel. So the 1.5 is 1.5% nickel. And what the 20 was, I don't know. So to be completely honest, guys, I do not know what 15 and 20 really means. It's just a mystery to me. I just know it's a nickel steel that we use for making Damascus or pattern layered steel. So there we go, guys. That's pretty much steel in a nutshell, the basic regular type of steel out there. There are lots of different types of steels out there. We're not covering all in this video, so it'll be too long. So hopefully, guys, I broke it down so it's pretty easy to understand, that you grasp on what the nomenclatures mean, what they are. Hopefully, you're now feeling more enlightened and all that fun jazz. If you are by any chance, guys, go ahead and hit that like button. Also, got any comments or suggestions, leave them down below. And don't forget to click that subscribe button and hit that bell for more notifications. With that, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.